Good morning, Martin. Hello.
Good morning, Bradley. How are you doing? All right?
Yeah, good. We meet again. Hello. Before we get into it, Martin, I just want to say if anyone's got any questions for Martin about copy, the Q&A area is just along from the chat on the right hand in the chat box. If we utilize that as a place for discussion rather than copy and pasting some sales pitches in there, and hopefully Martin will give people some tips around that today. But Martin, as I say, we'll get into this and make it as specific to networking as possible. So hopefully everyone in here can take something away from this conversation and talking email, talking LinkedIn. But first question to you is, how can people enhance their networking through good copy and through good communication?
Bradley, it's all about communication. It's all about engaging people, telling stories, and I'm showing my journalistic roots here, but it's about listening. I can't think anyone in this group would ever walk in somewhere and start spraying around business cards like confetti. But it's about listening to people and genuinely engaging with them and learning about what it is they do. And the other thing it's about having, and I'll illustrate how I know this, is having a 10-word pitch that sums up exactly what you do. So for instance, I've been saying to people this morning, I help you win business by getting your message across. And the reason I was reminded to do that, to brush it up, was a couple of meetings ago, and I don't know if he's here today, but someone that was around one of the tables, this was absolutely brilliant. He said, I help you pay less tax and make bigger profits. Well, as you can imagine, everyone around the table sat up straight and said, well, I'm listening to that. And he said, yes, I'm an accountant. And he said, if I'd gone in and said I'm an accountant, people tend to stop listening. But that is, I'm going to use that forever, because it's the best definition I've ever heard of a 10-word pitch that grabs people's attention, but also focuses on, this is how I help people, rather than just saying, this is what I do.
Well, maybe we should set people a challenge in the chat to say, what is your 10-word pitch? Or maybe people can go away and think about that. And we'll talk about some do's and we'll talk about some do-nots in this conversation. But we'll focus on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, we're big advocates of. It's a great platform, both in prospecting, networking in general, following up from networking events and that sorts of thing. So on LinkedIn specifically, and there's lots of ways to communicate on LinkedIn. How do you make your LinkedIn copy and your communications eye-catching and worth engaging in?
I'm absolutely with you. I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. I always say it's social media for grown-ups, and it's also a place where a lot of business gets done. And it's interesting to see a networking pal of mine, Tony Silver, on the call this morning, because I know he's a great expert on LinkedIn. For me, it's about keeping it simple. I think sometimes people try to cram too much into their profiles, too much into the stories that they post. But I'll say the word again, it's about telling stories. Keep it short. Tell a story about the difference you've made to someone. Because we communicate it. As a species, we communicate in stories. You think about the conversation we've had this morning. You don't just go on and meet someone and say bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. You say about the things you've done and things you're going to do and the things you want to do and what you do in your spare time. We tell stories. It's how we communicate as a species. So do that in LinkedIn. Keep it simple, and just illustrate what it is you do. Talking about the importance of stories. One of my clients was a mortgage provider, and they wanted me to do a series of articles for a local magazine. They said, what are we going to write about? We do mortgages. Who wants to read about mortgages? I said, don't write about mortgages. Write about the people that you've helped with your products. You're writing about the people, and the products just sort of come as that. That's how the story will come across, and you'll have the same benefit and the same impact. And that definitely applies to LinkedIn. Just keep it simple, tell stories, and engage with people.
Yeah, the difference you've made was a point you made there that stood out for me. That is, that's not you saying we do this. This is what we've done for someone specific, and that's a real life example for people to take away. Let's look at email as well. And email again is a big part of the networking process in follow-ups and not just follow-ups but prospecting and things like that. So when it comes to email, how can you make things more personable when it comes to email? Because we've all been on the receiving end, and this is both LinkedIn and email. We've been on the receiving end of that lengthy email, that lengthy LinkedIn message that we read the first paragraph and then we scroll to the bottom to see how long it's actually going to be. I get that on probably a daily basis. So if people here after the event can make their emails, can make those follow-up messages more personable and more professional, what tips could you give people?
Well, Brad, you just answered the question. Put yourself in the shoes of the person who's receiving the email, because we have all been on the receiving end of, you've met someone for 2 seconds at a networking event and you get a 3-sided email that goes on at massive length. Keep it simple and keep it, as you say, you've used the word personable. Keep it personal. It was great to meet you. I liked hearing about what you said about this, not just about the business, but show that you've really engaged with them as a person, and just keep it short, especially on the first follow-up contact. You mentioned about LinkedIn connections, and when you make a LinkedIn connection after a networking event, you've only got a few characters to use in the invitation, and that's good because it means you say, "Hi, it was great meeting you. Can we connect?" And that replicates the way you should be on an email. And it's not the excuse to say, "Hello, we met. Here's 10,000 words about my life story," because, as you say, no one's going to read it. And more than that, they're going to say, whatever they send through to me in future, I'm never going to engage with them again. So keep it down to earth, keep it personal.
I read once that if you've written some copy, reread it, and if you were given £1,000 for every word that you could remove from that copy, how much would you have? And it's amazing when you look through that copy then and go, "Oh, that word doesn't need to be in there. That paragraph doesn't need to be in there." And since then, that stuck with me. So every time I write some copy, whether it be an email or a post or something like that, I think that and think how rich I could be.
No one's ever made me an offer. I'd be a rich man by now. I'd be coming to you from a beach if they'd ever offered me that.
Yeah. So when we talk about things that you can do, what are things to avoid? And when it comes to writing their own copy, what are the key things, whether that be a LinkedIn post, a message, or an email? What are the key things that you would just tell people to avoid?
I think the first thing is to accept it's really hard to write about yourself. My toughest assignment in the last 3.5 years was writing my own website. It's like pulling teeth. You need that sense of distance and perspective to be able to write about a business. And that so many people say to me, "I know what it is I do. I know what I'm great at. I know what I want to say." So ideally get someone else to do it. That's not a pitch, by the way, but just saying, accept that it's not easy to write about yourself. But again, keep it simple and don't write too much, because the things that seem important to you, there's things I must tell them about this, about my qualifications, about my experience, about all the great things I've done. People, they want to hear what's in it for them. This is how I've made a difference to people. So always, and I know I'm sounding like a stuck record, but always focus on the person who's listening to your message and the benefit you're going to bring them with what you do and who you are and the difference you make. So always think about that. And the other thing I would say, and again, this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, make sure that your grammar and spelling are on point, because people will subconsciously mark you down if they're not. And I know that people are seen as a little bit sort of old school and dyed in the wool if you say this, but people really do notice if your grammar creaks and the spelling isn't right.